Okie dokie. Good morning, everyone. And today we're going to talk about Workbook Lesson 124 for the School for Course in Miracles. And I had a lot of fun reading this a few times over the years, probably, and a couple times in the last week or so, I guess, at least. And this is one of the ones that has a lot of profound peace, I think, to it when we let it soak in. And it's also a great opportunity to look at our resistance and use the principle of cognitive dissonance, of just noticing how in Jesus' course he put side by side the two thought systems for us to look at. So I did a little bit of that at the beginning, and then I thought we could just kind of let it soak through and let the words soak through. So what I thought I'd do is start out with a very short opening meditation and then finish with the same sentence from the very last paragraph, the last sentence in the last paragraph of the lesson, which is on, I have it here, let's see, page 222, I believe it is in the workbook. So just there. Yeah, let me remember I'm one with God. So I'm just going to read the last sentence, and if you want to just relax, sit back, close your eyes, and just kind of let the idea behind these words soak in and permeate your mind. Let's see what happens. Okay. Let me remember I am one with God, at one with all my brothers and myself, in everlasting holiness and peace. So just take a few moments and let that soak in. Okay. Whenever you're ready, we'll resume. So I made a bunch of notes of things. I was, as I was reading through the lesson again, I was noticing how much there was in it, and I started making some notes, and it's like I got to the third paragraph and I was already filling up quite a bit. So I thought I'd just stop there before I wrote too much. And anyway, so I'll just read some of the thoughts that came to mind. I'll start by reading the first few paragraphs. So the first paragraph begins, well, the lesson title again is "Let Me Remember I'm One with God." And the first three paragraphs are really loaded in a great way. Today, we will again give thanks for our identity in God. Our home is safe, protection guaranteed in all we do, power and strength available to us in all our undertakings. We can fail in nothing. Everything we touch takes on a shining light that blesses and that heals. At one with God and with the universe, we go our way rejoicing, with the thought that God himself goes everywhere with us. So right off the bat, the first word of the title, let, I was just kind of letting the word let soak in and the meanings. And so I looked up synonyms for let, and among them I found allow, permit, authorize, enable, grant, encourage. And Holy Spirit is asking us to let him do the heavy lifting, which the other day in one of the classes this week I realized is really nothing in truth, because there's nothing to lift. Since Perfect Oneness doesn't need any updates, changes, or modifications, we just need to, quote, throw the switch, unquote, on the decision maker control panel dashboard in our mind, from the ego to the Holy Spirit position, and let Holy Spirit do the rest. So that's really easy. So it's really when we choose that setting in our mind, that switch position in the dashboard to let Holy Spirit, you know, show that we were wrong happily, and allow that correction to occur, then it's easy, as well as simple. And then we see how it is actually simple for the Holy Spirit and easy too. But when we fight it, of course, that's the resistance, and that's when it seems incredibly difficult. And that's when the 20,000 million gazillion ton steel door and the solid granite block wall seems welded shut, and we need, again, Holy Spirit's help to see things differently. And it's actually this feather light touch. You know what? It reminds me of, a quick aside. My dad worked for Lawrence Livermore Lab, and in Northern California, and Abel and Dave know where this is. And he worked in Building 212, which they used as a prop in the movie Tron. Did anyone ever see that movie? But they had this massive door. And it was actually, to keep the radiation from getting out. But anyway, it was very, very carefully engineered so that one person could actually open it. I seem to recall something like that. But it was like this enormous door, but one person could actually move it. And I think that's kind of like we look at this enormous obstacle to peace that is all of our resistance to the Holy Spirit's curriculum, and it seems like this massive thing, but yet when we follow the Holy Spirit's promptings and go up to it and with that help, that guidance, it actually opens fairly easy. And it's kind of like when you look back on all the things that we made such big deals about, in retrospect, they weren't that big a deal. But not as you're dreading or whatever, but once you actually do what's being asked, which is change teachers, it's not so difficult. So there's just a few reflections on the word let. And so the ego's opposition to letting is prevention, prohibition, resistance, sabotage. And it musters enormous propaganda, the double shield of oblivion, to keep us from seeing the unconscious, unfounded guilt, which is really nothing. But we need Holy Spirit's help to look at it first before skipping over those crucial steps. And in these classes, we've gone over many times the wonderful simplicity that Ken Wapnick suggested. If you're stranded on a desert island and you could remember 2 workbook lessons, 5 and 34 are pretty good picks, because that's seeing that we're not upset for the reason we think, and it's not anything in the world that's messing with our mind. And 34, we could see peace instead of this. We could continue to throw that switch into the Holy Spirit position and see that the unconscious, unfounded guilt really didn't have a basis in truth, in eternity. So then I got as far as the first word in the title. Now I'm on to the second word, me. Don't worry, I'm not going to belabor all of these in this detail, but I thought that it was kind of fun just to notice the first few words. So
this is going to be a long class, right?
No, not that long. Okay, so the second word, me. So we're back to the decision maker in my mind. We're always choosing between only one of 2 thought systems, Holy Spirit or the ego. And the quote who, unquote, lowercase s, lower self s, is the me, the identity that needs undoing via Holy Spirit's replacement therapy. And that's the cause of my projections, so that I can and must use all of them, all those projections, with Holy Spirit's help, to get back to the mind, the decision maker, to change the ticker tape scrolling across the mental movie from condemnation to forgiveness, from separate to shared interests, from oblivion to awakening, to the what, capital S self, identity that we all share eternally. So let me, if we get the right context and the right thought system, it all kind of clicks into place. And then the third word, remember. I looked up a couple of synonyms there: recollect, recall, think back to, restore, reintegrate, resurrect, reinvigorate. And that's what Holy Spirit wants us to do with that awareness in our mind that we took with us into the dream, that sees that not only is our real identity uncontaminated by any error, but everyone else is in the same boat. The ego, of course, fights that. And so I looked up the synonyms for the opposite of forgetting: deny, overlook, ignore, isolate, imprison, mothball, suspend, oppose, contradict, challenge, retract, repudiate, repulse, decline, veto, and dismiss. That's probably plenty. Those are all the ways that we fight the remembering. But when we just let go of it, there's so much ease. It's kind of like, I'm reminded of somewhere I read years ago that it takes more muscles to frown than to smile. And I think the smile, the inner smile that the Holy Spirit wants us to engage in is just smiling gently at the silliness of the belief in separation, and just nod politely, say, yeah, I tried that. I'm moving on. I've got another teacher now. Thanks very much, kind of thing. Okay, and then the next phrase, one with God, the pure non-dual identity. It's not in ego's vocabulary at all. The ego doesn't even have the slightest conception of what this means, so it zones out when this phrase appears. And so we need to be really gentle and patient with ourselves when we're reading the course, either together or alone, and we zone out and we nod off, or or we say, yeah, I got it. And then 3 seconds later, it's like, oh yeah, what was I supposed to do this afternoon? Or yeah, all those things come flooding in. But just, be really patient with ourselves. And then one with all my brothers. And there's another meaningless idea to the ego, because to the ego, only partial alliances are tolerated. And those are only in the context of special hate, special love bargains. And as Ken Wapnick reminds us, is one of the most challenging ideas, since we want to leave out part of the sonship to maintain specialness, and therefore not threaten our special, separate who identity if we include everyone and everything in our definition of self, capital S self. So if we do that, then there's no room for the ego, and then it gets a little panicky. What? What do you mean there's no separate self? A few moments ago, I was thinking about something that was on TV. It kind of triggered memory of some of the cartoons and cartoon characters, and I was thinking of, what if Hanna-Barbera got totally fixated on believing that they were Fred Flintstone, or Charles Schultz, decided that he was actually Charlie Brown, and and if thoroughly got immersed in the role and believed that, it's really kind of like what Holy Spirit is telling us. We're immersed in a cartoon character. We're immersed in a puppet. We're immersed in a movie role. We're immersed in a dream figure, and whatever metaphor you like. And we're so convinced this is the real deal that we just need to listen to that gentle voice within the dream that's whispering to us, saying, that's not what you really are. You're not this separate, silly, seemingly separate self. And we're all getting that at our own pace, at our own time, and the outcome is guaranteed, fortunately. Okay, so one with myself, another phrase. The ego is terrified at the idea of our decision maker choosing against it. Ego doesn't want us to go anywhere near the decision maker in our mind, not 6 feet or 6 light years. It doesn't want to have its insanity erased. And then I was reminded of, this is something I put toward the end of the second book I wrote, that there's a quote from the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz. Alliteration there, I just noticed, yeah. And this I kind of picture this as the ego, being discovered, found out by when we switch over to Holy Spirit on the control panel in our mind. You cursed brat, look what you've done. I'm melting. Oh, what a world, what a world. Who would have thought that a good little girl like you could destroy my beautiful wickedness? I always thought that was a great quote, because it sort of parodies how silly our egos are, but what's left after the ego is melted is what we really are, and that's when we get home. That's when we realize we had the power to go home all along, right? Lots of great Wizard of Oz metaphors, but I won't go there right now. So I found a few other places that kind of tied into this thought here. So I'm just going to read this. This is from the text on page 591. This is from chapter 28, section 1, paragraphs 11 through 13. So page 591 of the English print edition, or third edition or later. Okay, the miracle comes quietly into the mind that stops an instant and is still. It reaches gently from that quiet time, and from the mind it healed in quiet then, to other minds to share its quietness. And they will join in doing nothing to prevent its radiant extension back into the mind which caused all minds to be. Born out of sharing, there can be no pause in time to cause the miracle delay in hastening to all unquiet minds and bringing them an instant stillness when the memory of God returns to them. Their own remembering is quiet now, and what has come to take its place will not be wholly unremembered afterwards. So even if we just get little glimpses, it's cumulative, it stays with us, and we get a little bit more motivation each time to choose Holy Spirit. So the next paragraph, yeah.
Excuse me.
Sure.
What was the reference on that?
Page 591, which is chapter 28, section 1, paragraphs 11 through 13. So now I'm on paragraph 12 here. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Sure. So the next paragraph goes, he to whom time is given offers thanks for every quiet instant given him. For in that instant is God's memory allowed to offer all its treasures to the Son of God, for whom they have been kept. How gladly does he offer them unto the one for whom he has been given them. And his Creator shares his thanks because he would not be deprived of his effects. The instant silence that his Son accepts gives welcome to eternity and him, and lets them enter where they would abide. For in that instant does the Son of God do nothing that would make himself afraid. And
I was thinking about and reading paragraphs like this one. It sounds nice, the quiet, the silence, but it becomes really, really nice compared to the whole war scenario that we're looking at in chapter 23. So like whenever I have a moment of peace, the ego starts screaming, let me remember I'm at war with God.
Yeah.
Let me remember I'm at war with my true self.
Exactly.
Let me remember damnation and conflict. But it's like being in I remember I had a friend who was in Belgium during World War II when she was a little girl, and she was in the basement with the bombs coming down, and just how horrific that was. But that's what Jesus is describing, what's going on in my head when I'm at war with myself. And then that quiet and that silence, when the bombs stop and I'm able to step back and be quiet for a minute, that's when it becomes really dramatic. That's when it becomes, oh yeah, let the bomb stop, let the war stop for just even a second. Then it's like profound. Then it's like, oh, this is what quiet really is. This is what silence really feels like. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's that cognitive dissonance that, the psychological term that describes, putting two things that are opposite, which is what Jesus does in pretty much every page of the course, juxtaposing the ego and the Holy Spirit's, insanity side by side. And when they're apart, we don't see them, kind of like, it's kind of like those optical illusions where you've got, I saw one the other day that had a gray cylinder and another gray cylinder, and one was shadowed by another taller object. And it's probably better visual, but you put the two, apart from each other, and you say, well, the one behind the shadow is much darker, but then you juxtapose the two of them together and you see they're exactly the same shade of gray, kind of thing. It's, a lot of those optical illusions like that, but that's kind of like how the ego works, is it tries to make differences a big deal. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a few moments, is, making the big deal out of differences is one of the ways that we continue the war. One of the ways that we keep the artillery going and the bombs flying and the craziness going, because that maintains our victimhood status, our martyrdom, a punch hole in the martyrdom card, whatever it takes to keep a separate self going, our ego's willing to do it, no matter how dire the situation, our egos really have no problem with suffering. But the very last thing that we'd ever want to admit is that the Son of God is innocent and tag, we're all it. So what? Can't have that. Don't go there. So yeah, your comments are spot on, Tim, because that's the war. That the war is really all the things that we do to avoid the peace, all the while knowing that peace is there waiting for us. And we just need to be really patient with ourselves and really gentle when we notice that we're, how'd that sword get in my hand? How did my finger get on that nuclear launch button? How did, and it's like, well, wait a minute, who did that to me? Who made me push that button? Who made me pick up that sword? Yep. So the third paragraph in that section is how instantly the memory of God arises in the mind that has no fear to keep the memory away. Its own remembering has gone. There is no past to keep its fearful image in the way of glad awakening to present peace. The trumpets of eternity resound throughout the stillness, yet disturb it not. And what is now remembered is not fear, but rather is the cause that fear was made to render unremembered and undone. Sounds like a double shield of oblivion once again, doesn't it? The stillness speaks in gentle sounds of love. The Son of God remembers from before his own remembering came in between the present and the past to shut them out. So we have to keep, in order to step out of that quiet center in the roaring cyclone that's around us, to resume the battle, we have to intentionally, consciously choose against the peace, and we have to pick up the armaments and join in the fight, and and sometimes we're not conscious of it, but it is always a decision. Dave?
That's what I was going to say, is that sometimes our decisions are unconscious, and that takes a lot more self-honesty and a lot more what's the word I'm looking for?
Practice.
Okay, that's a good word.
How's that? Yeah, there's probably plenty of others, but yeah, that's really helpful because yeah, and that's a great insight too, because a lot of times we don't seemingly consciously remember of joining back in the fight and jumping in with guns blazing and and full armament kind of thing, but there's always a part of us that the more we pay attention when we're not at peace, I must have chosen wrongly because I'm not at peace. When there's just enough practice of that, we can kind of see, as you're going into a fight, as you're going into an argument or a battle with someone on TV, or a political position, or upset about a virus or an economic situation, or pick health situation, pick anything. Anytime we can catch ourselves going there, there's a part of us that's kind of like, oh yeah, I could see peace instead of this, and oh yeah, you're not upset for the reason you think, but it takes a lot of practice to notice that, because our minds are really powerful, and so we've so thoroughly identified with those cartoon characters and puppets and dream figures and movie roles that it takes a lot of practice to realize that we're the author of the cartoon. We're the one that made all that stuff up. So
hey, Bruce.
Yeah.
So yeah, one thing that I've noticed with myself is that most of the time I'm not aware of the bombs falling and the cratering and all that stuff, the real graphic imagery of war. I'm aware of little discomforts. On a really bad day, though, I am aware of the bombs and the shooting and the nuclear bombs going off and everything.
Right.
So I think, most of the time we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
But there's still the whole iceberg there sitting.
Absolutely.
And once in a while, a really bad day happens and we get to see the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then it's really, it is those days actually I find helpful to really concentrate on choosing again, because I on the bad days, I really am sure that I do not want that. On the other days, it doesn't seem as important, but on the bad days, boy, it's really important to choose again.
Exactly. Yeah, and that brings up a good point too. I think I'll use an engineering metaphor, but hopefully it'll be something that will make sense. If anybody remembers back to the old CB radio days, they had a squelch control so that you could if there was just random noise on the radio, you could kind of turn up the squelch so you wouldn't hear all the static, and it required a certain level of signal to break through to actually hear that signal. So it's kind of like a threshold control. We have I think what Holy Spirit does is help us slowly turn down the threshold of our sensitivity to pain and discomfort, to where we realize that there's no order of difficulty in miracles, and there's also no order of difficulty in upset. And so if we just gradually turn that control down over days, months, years, decades even, then it's kind of like, oh, I can actually notice when I'm just a little bit upset rather than up to here with upset. But it takes a lot of practice, I think, to be sensitive to that. And oftentimes that'll take the form, in my mind, just an example is like, I'll notice that I've said something that was annoying or irritating to my wife or something, and I'll say, hey, that was out of line, and apologize or whatever. And that sometimes will help me get back on track with things. But those are the kind of things that I think it takes a lot of practice to just notice when we're actively, complicit in adding kerosene to the fire of whatever is going on. So, yeah.
Kathy Jones, then Tony, I think.
Okay.
Me first?
Sure.
Anyway, yeah, me too, like what everybody else has been saying about how, I'm not, in my own experience, I'm not aware always when I make the decision for Holy Spirit or make the decision for ego. So, but I can always notice the results, because then if I start going into peace, I say, oh, I decided for Holy Spirit, my decision maker did. And then when I get back into the anger again, or the fear or the whatever, I say, oh, I'm back in ego. So yeah, thank you, Bruce.
This must be on everybody's mind, because yesterday I was thinking about that. Like, you think that you've chosen, you start your day and you ask the Holy Spirit, you invite it in to guide you, and that's what you've set your intention. But then things happen, you find yourself upset, and you think, well, the Course tells you that it's not unintentional. I mean, that you deliberately are doing this and that you think it's unconscious. But I found that it's in Workbook lesson 136, and it's in the context of sickness, but of course everything's sickness, right? And how it's a defense against the truth, and that it says that they're not unintentional, but it's almost like when the truth threatens to break through, then you consciously. But it happens so quickly. It says they seem to be unconscious, but because of the rapidity with which you choose to use them, in that second, even less, in which the choice is made, you recognize exactly what you would attempt to do, and then proceed to think that it is done. So that's a hard pill to swallow, because you think, surely I didn't want to be upset by this, or I didn't want to judge this event or this person, whatever, I've chosen truth today. But there it is, it just seems to be unconscious, but it's not.
Exactly.
So anyway, I just
that fits perfectly, Tony. Thanks. Yeah, and that I think that was another example of that threshold. The Holy Spirit is asking us to really notice, how am I feeling at every moment? Am I at peace? And most of the time we kind of gloss over a lot of stuff, and I think it takes a lot of discipline and practice, gentle, patient discipline, to just notice when I'm not at peace, and then say, okay, if I'm not at peace, I must have chosen wrongly, because I'm not at peace, and I hope I've been wrong. Back to those rules for discipline.
I was reflecting on what Abe was saying about the bombs seem like they're falling now, and yet in that last sentence in paragraph 13. He says, our own remembering comes between the present and the past to shut out that experience of peace. So in any given moment, I mean, the irony of war is that war and internal war is always going on in the past inside of me. I have to like go into this fantasy world of war that's happening, somehow happened in the past. And I get preoccupied with that. Even if it feels like in the present moment, the bombs are dropping right now.
Yeah.
In the present moment, there are no bombs, is what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
If I can say present with peace, whatever is happening externally, I use that as an excuse to launch back into the past, this fantasy world of war.
Yep. The tiny mad ideas is all already over, and we have to keep dredging from the past. Exactly. Keep pulling something that never happened in order to maintain the never was identity. Huh? Yeah. Exactly. But the present, from the Holy Spirit's perspective, is completely unscathed, untainted, and pristine, ever fresh and new to rejuvenate our minds, and yet we keep pulling in the pigpen character in Charles Schultz's cast of characters and say, "Oh no, I'm that." No, instead of realizing, no, I'm actually the cartoonist, and I could draw a different something, on the slate, kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, so moving to a little further along in that the first part of the lesson 124 again. We give thanks for our identity in God. Now we're finally in the first paragraph. Gratitude is the appropriate response to God, all our siblings, and Holy Spirit, which is the identity Jesus' curriculum is leading us back to inexorably. Gratitude is like the tractor beam pulling us home, and forgiveness the rocket that denies the ego's power to do anything in truth, to do or be anything in truth. So another phrase there, that first paragraph, our home is safe. Our identity as all-encompassing spirit hasn't been compromised and never will be. Perfect oneness doesn't have anything outside itself to challenge, attack, or oppose it. Anything less than that is not only unsafe, it doesn't exist, except through hypnotic holograms, magical monster movies, and dangerous, depressing dreams. Had to get a little alliteration in there. Then we have protection is guaranteed in all we do. This is another place that's ripe for level confusion, but Holy Spirit keeps reminding us it's always only about the mind. So I just made some notes here. The royal we, in quotes, that Holy Spirit is using applies when together, having chosen sanity, we have the light that dispels the darkness of specialness, isolation, separation, and substitution. Our mind is protected from the fantasy of uncertainty, vulnerability, and the foibles of the we-they silliness. We, with Holy Spirit guiding us, need do nothing, since our identity is reestablished. We might, quote, do, unquote, things in the dream, but these don't have any impact on our real world, our real identity. The perfect feedback system of the world assures us that any lack of peace merely requires a correction, atonement or attunement, to the forgotten song of Holy Spirit's call to all. So that we're protected in everything we do in the mind would be the Cliff Note summary of that.
I was just thinking about how violent most cartoons are. I mean, Popeye was always pumping down the spinach to beat up Brutus.
Right.
Bugs Bunny was always doing something horrendous to Elmer Fudd.
And Roadrunner off the charts.
Roadrunner was just like blow up the poor Wile E. Coyote all the time. I mean, it was awful. He was always dropping him off cliffs and bombing him. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah,
and yet the Roadrunner actually never did anything. So I guess that's totally passive aggressive, right?
Yosemite Sam had guns.
That's right.
Bigger than his whole body. Oh my Lord.
Yeah,
a lot of lean, mean fighting machines on the cartoons. Abe?
Yeah. The Roadrunner also never gave up. He just kept at it and at it. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Well, neither did Wile E. the Coyote. He didn't give up either.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh man, this is really like messing my childhood up now. Jeez.
A lot of
What
good
happened to
metaphors in those
Casper,
cartoons.
Casper the friendly ghost, for God's sake.
There we go. There we go. Exactly.
He's
The
a
Holy
Kathy
Ghost. Right?
Cosin. Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Someone else have something to say? Or? Okay. So the next phrase, power and strength available to us in all our undertakings. So a few notes here. We can learn to generalize our choice to consistently forgive, to increasingly identify with Holy Spirit's universal curriculum, which applies to all situations, conditions, and specifics in the dream of space, time, and individuality. The power of Holy Spirit is the power of total inclusion and complete reunion. And we benefit from Holy Spirit's strength when we choose to drop ego's sword of condemnation. The ego's pathetic adversarial attempts at, quote, power over alleged others, unquote, fades when we experience the gentle power and strength of Holy Spirit's all-inclusive innocence, lifting our minds above the battlefield of otherness. So another phrase, aligned in our minds with Holy Spirit, we can fail in nothing. So maligned by the ego, we succeed in nothing. Ego may appear foolproof in its dark dream, but it's not God-proof. And our dream of prodigal return is guaranteed since we've never left. That's kind of nice. And I think that's what the piece that workbook lessons like this really remind us of, is that if we let it soak in, that, there is that piece, we can look at the battle, see that with Holy Spirit's help that they were nothing. And it's like, okay. There is a possibility that sustainable peace, is available. In fact, it's inevitable, happily inevitable. Yeah. Another phrase. Oh, and Almond.
Thanks. I just thought about that idea of how there'll be that experience of peace, and the next thing you know, we're at, raging war with our spouse or kids or whatever. And I think I just got that it's the moment I attach and want that feeling of peace to be visible in the world. I want it to be something that I can put my finger on, that I can, okay, relax. Now the political thing's going to be okay. Okay, now my kids are going to be fine. Now I'm healed, whatever. And that is because that feeling of peace, it has nothing to do with time or space or anything that's going on in the world. And yet my usual way of identifying being at peace is things are going well. I don't have there's no major trauma going on. There's nothing I have to do right now. And so it just hit me that it's really about becoming used to a non-specific, non-temporal, non-spatial experience, and learning to trust that from that, whatever I have to do while I still think I'm in a body will follow, and take my attention away from thinking that what follows is what's really important. I mean, this just feels like really huge. It's simple. I mean, I've been hearing it forever, but all of a sudden it's like I can see why that, even just I mentioned at the beginning, the sun shining today. Well, I feel better because the sun is shining today. And just even that little bit of externals is so important that I forget that, no, it isn't the sun that's making me feel peaceful. And if I think it is, then I'm on the wrong track already. I'm already on the wrong track. So anyway, thank you for this.
Thank you. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying the sunshine or whatever seems to be going right in the world. It's just the, the attachment and the aversions kind of thing, kind of getting it back to that sort of Eastern mysticism, and recognizing that it's like, if my peace of mind is appendage to anything that happens or doesn't happen in the world, I'm betting on the wrong horse again, the wrong thought system, the wrong teacher. Yeah.
Kathy Jones.
Kathy?
Yeah, and the Course talks about too, Jesus talks about ego retaliation. When we do get like we're too close to love, the ego will retaliate with viciousness at best, suspicious. I mean, no, it's suspiciousness at best, viciousness at worst, I think.
Mhm.
And yeah, the Holy Spirit has shown that to me, an example, because I was asking about it. And one minute I would just be in this deep, beautiful love, and then get up and then be crying and wailing uncontrollably. That's only happened one time, but still, you know, it's just, it was like an extreme example. I think Holy Spirit was showing me how the ego will retaliate. And I've heard David Hoffmeister talk of this too. So anyway, that's, thank you.
Thank you. And, you know, the image that came to mind as you were sharing that is sometimes in my saner moments, when I notice an ego attack like that, I try to imagine something kind of like a, you know, a mama mountain lion or a cat, you know, holding a little kitten by the scruff of the neck while it's, you know, its limbs are flailing around, kind of like Holy Spirit, you know, just noticing the ego thrashing around, doing its thing, and eventually it'll tire of that because it doesn't get anywhere. There's no traction. It's an idle thought, you know, and so I just, you know, just figure. I just figure there's, you know, there's some part of my mind that's watching this gently, and if I can identify with that, you know, the Holy Spirit, then I can, you know, watch the ego machinations do their thing, and just, you know, eventually, you know, sooner or later, we'll all tire of that. And it's like, oh yeah, back to lessons 5 and 34 again. I'm not upset with the reason, I think. I can see pieces out of this.
I was thinking of the huge setup, like with what Lynn was talking about, and then Kathy. It's consciously I'm remembering I'm one with God, and I'm having this profound, peaceful experience, and then suddenly I seem to step out of that and back into the world, and all hell breaks loose. Well, how can I trust what I was just experiencing? I got to come back and deal with the world that's full of all kinds of weird stuff. And how violent it even compared to that, it seems to be that I'm trying to convince myself I can't trust that I'm one with God, but I can certainly trust that war is going to happen again. Whether it's a personal war with my spouse or you know, political war externally in the streets. I mean, it just undermines my whole trust in, I can trust war because I know it'll happen again. I can't really trust that experience of peace from an ego point of view.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly none of our egos can, because, you know, that doesn't know anything other than that. But it does seem like there's also a part of us that knows that there's a peace possible, and we can. I think one of the messages that the Holy Spirit gives us is sort of equivalent to chewing gum and walking, that you can actually, you know, carry that peace forward into things, and you know, and that's where I think the practice comes in. Because I think we have all have our herd of sacred cows, metaphorically, of things that, well, yeah, I can apply peace to, you know, this limited set of things. But when it comes to, you know, this interpersonal thing, or this financial thing, or this health thing, or you know, then it's like, oh no, I couldn't ask for Holy Spirit's help there. And eventually, you know, as we kind of turn up the threshold and seeing the ego's noise and choosing against it, you know, then the clarity of the real alternative, the Holy Spirit's thought system, becomes easier to choose. But you're right, Tim. It takes an enormous amount of practice, doesn't it? I mean, to notice that we actually can do the chew gum and walk thing of being in the world and listening to, you know, whether or not I'm at peace.
Dave Van Dyke has his hand raised. Teacher.
Dave.
Okay, let's see. I really like this in the workbook for students, number 13, what is a miracle? And paragraph 4, to me, kind of addresses what you were talking about there, Tim, where we have an experience of holiness or peace or whatever, you know, some kind of connection with our real self. And then the world seems to call us back. And so this paragraph 4, I really like. It says, the miracle is taken first on faith, because to ask for it implies the mind has been ready to conceive of what it cannot see and does not understand. Yet faith will bring its witnesses to show that what it rested on is really there. and thus the miracle will justify your faith in it and show you it rested on a world more real than what you saw before, a world redeemed from what you thought it was, from what you thought was there. And to me, that's like the internal sense of realness that we experience through the Holy Spirit. Makes the outer world just kind of pale by comparison. Eventually, it doesn't just. I don't think this happens all at once. We go back and forth until we go. That really does feel more real, and then we start to trust that. That becomes our, where we kind of anchor. Hopefully, eventually. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
I think that's really helpful because, it does take a while for that to anchor in, and I think we gradually, with Holy Spirit's help, pick out one sacred cow at a time out of the herd, through our forgiveness classroom, and and realize that it's the sameness is there. It's not, the ego sacred cows, suddenly become more equal, something like that. Yeah. Let's see, where are we at? Okay. Aligned with, in our minds with the Holy Spirit, we can fail in nothing. Maligned by ego, we succeed in nothing. Yeah, okay, I think I read that one. Here's another part of that first part of that workbook lesson, 124. Everything we touch takes on a shining light that blesses and that heals. So as we generalize Holy Spirit's lessons, there is nothing in the world that our Holy Spirit aligned mind doesn't bless, since we see the three-part decision maker, Holy Spirit, ego, mind, and everyone, realizing we're all in the same boat. Everyone, of us is an equal children in the mind, children of equal child of God, merely dreaming we left home. And everyone is worthy of our infinite patience and gentle compassion, including our silly, seemingly separate selves, right? So forgiveness applies to everyone and everything all the time without exception. And, we don't always go there. So again, patience, gentleness, persistence, and slowly but surely, we allow Holy Spirit to transform our minds. Another line, at one with God and with the universe, we go our way rejoicing, with the thought that God himself goes with us, everywhere with us. So Holy Spirit, contrary to insanity and arrogance, recognizes that our total inclusive identity can't go anywhere any more than our mind could go anywhere. The toxic, scary, divisive dream will merely cease to seem to be, and then our imagined travels will be over, having returned home. So it's quite a journey, seemingly, to get there. But we have help. We do have at every step of the way. There's a real alternative that there's no one that has totally burned the bridge to the Holy Spirit in their mind, and so we do have that all the time, even just because we don't use it. I was actually, Dave and I were talking about software last night, and we were talking about some of these applications that we have, and that do thousands of amazing things, but we only use just a tiny little part of it, kind of like the portion of our brains kind of thing. But our access to the Holy Spirit is kind of the same way. We have these incredible capabilities with our minds, but because we only just dabble a little bit in Holy Spirit attunement and alignment, we just get a little dabble result in terms of the peace we experience. So it takes a lot of practice, doesn't it?
One of the words you used before was prohibit, as in an opposite to remembering or restoring. Mm-hmm. Like I'm prohibiting I'm prohibiting having an experience with the Holy Spirit, mm-hmm. by being so obsessed with the war.
Yeah.
In the past.
Exactly.
Yosemite Sam, whatever. So I look up, I just, it's hard enough trying to get people either to wear a mask or not wear a mask. I mean, half the country is totally divided on the mask issue. But you remember prohibition? I mean, for 13 years, they outlawed alcohol. I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, that's just so off the charts, mind blowing. And people went along with that legally. Of course, you know, all the corruption that went along with it kept the whole system going. But yeah, prohibitions, I mean, it takes a lot to prohibit anything. And to prohibit an experience of the Holy Spirit takes a lot of laws of chaos. a lot of legality in terms of the ego.
Yeah. So Tim, are you saying the Holy Spirit is our speakeasy? That's our sanctuary. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, finally, we're at the second paragraph of lesson 124. It begins with, how holy are our minds? So but this is a perfect example of an exercise Holy Spirit gives in cognitive dissonance, where we protest loudly that we don't feel one bit holy, when we're honest, when we judge the world and blast it with our blame thrower. It's an exhausting and exasperating exercise. Jesus and Holy Spirit here are appealing to that awareness of what we truly are, knowing full well that the song for peace is inevitably stronger than the ego's dirges, laments, and whiny, tiring tantrums. So, but you know, eventually we'll get tired of those whiny little, you know, twangy, boring songs that we sing to ourselves, and listen to something far more inspiring, right? Okay, sameness, equality is the gateway to oneness. Since the Course uses an indirect approach to restoring mindfulness, we don't go directly to God via contemplating oneness, so much as we undo our obsession with differences, and the sameness becomes more and more self-evident. The light that was always there becomes apparent. So all I got is, after I read through this lesson a few times, but then I just kind of landed on the word equal in paragraph 3. So in paragraph 3 says, what we receive is our eternal gift to those who follow after, and to those who went before, stayed with us a while. And God, who loves us with the equal love in which we were created, smiles on us and offers us the happiness we gave. So at this point, I just kind of went off and I discovered there's 150 instances of the word equal in the Course. And I thought that's a pretty useful, you know, practical, down-to-earth idea. And one of the lessons that Ken Wapnick gave a workshop on is, you know, let's make this year different by making it all the same. So that'd be probably good advice for 2020, even though it's a bit challenging. But what if we were to you know, really focus on equality and the idea that everyone in truth is equal, not on the level of form, but on the level of mind. And so I looked up some synonyms for equal: identical, uniform, alike, one and the same, equivalent, indistinguishable, matching, twin, comparable, similar, peer, fellow, co-equal, I must have missed one word there, counterpart, match, parallel. So these are all dualistic words, but they hint at our completely shared identity that transcends the confusion and ambiguity of words. So, you know, ego's insistence on specialness masks the underlying equality of everyone and everything. So anyway, and so I grabbed a few quotes from the Course that have the word equal in them. So here's one from text page 347. And this is chapter 16, section 6, paragraph 12, first 7 sentences, page 347 in the text. The Holy Spirit asks only this little help of you. Whenever your thoughts wander to a special, and I put unequal in parentheses, relationship, which still attracts you, enter with him into a holy instant, and there let him release you. He needs only your willingness to share his equal, in parentheses, I added that, perspective to give it to you completely. And your willingness need not be complete because his is perfect. I think we've been talking about this quite a bit this past hour, you know, that our willingness certainly isn't complete. And that's why we need this remedial curriculum. So that's why we're all helping each other here with this, right? Okay. And your willingness need not be complete because his is perfect. It is his task to atone for your unwillingness by his perfect faith. And it is his faith you share with him there. Out of your recognition of your unwillingness for your release, his perfect willingness is given you. So the recognition of our unwillingness is letting Holy Spirit slowly but surely turn up the threshold on the background noise, and notice the ego's incessant chatter and loud shrieks and and raucous screams of victimhood and martyrdom and woe is me and the world is messing me up in countless ways. And then in the internal battle is I mess myself up, and it's irredeemable, both of which are lies. And
it's interesting that he says it's not my willingness. He's not asking me to be willing. He's saying out of my recognition of how unwilling I am.
exactly.
He's not even asking me to be willing. Just see how much you do not want to do this.
Bingo. That's it. Yeah. That's really potent, isn't it? Because if we had the willingness, we wouldn't need the course. But just to notice, and there's that cognitive dissonance again. Just put the unwillingness up against the willingness, put the ego's insanity and entrenched, digging its heels, fight against, up against the Holy Spirit, which has no opposite and no polarization, and seeing the peace that's possible there. Just even if we just get a glimpse of the peace of just a moment's respite of letting go of the battle, it's like, wow. That's it, like you were sharing earlier, Tim, about when you in the wars, when the bombing stops, it's a big difference, it's a noticeable difference. Exactly. So let me read that one again. Out of your recognition of your unwillingness for your release, his perfect willingness is given you. Call upon him, for heaven is at his call, and let him call in heaven for you. So we need Holy Spirit's help to see the sameness, which is a real cornerstone of forgiveness. So another sentence with the word equal in it, or a quote rather. This is early on in the text, page 10, chapter 1, section 3, paragraph 6. So page 10 in the text. You respond to what you perceive, and as you perceive, so shall you behave. The golden rule asks you to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This means that the perception of both must be accurate. Aha! It probably hint that our perception of each other is not terribly accurate when we base it on form, huh? The golden rule is the rule for appropriate behavior. You cannot behave appropriately unless you perceive correctly. Since you and your neighbor are equal members of one family, as you perceive both, so will you do to both. You should look out from the perception of your own holiness to the holiness of others. So that's probably the right use of namaste. How's that? You let Holy Spirit to clean up the loose ends of our namaste errors. Okay, and here's one more. There's about 140 some odd more, but here's one more with the word equality in it. This is from text page 45. I just picked a few of these that out of the 150 instances of the word equality. This is chapter 3, section 5, paragraph 8. 3, 5, 8, and page 45 in the text. What happens to perceptions if there are no judgments and nothing but perfect equality? Perception becomes impossible. Truth can only be known. All of it is equally true, and knowing any part of it is to know all of it. Only perception involves partial awareness. And we can see where parts and parties and partisans and partiality gets us in trouble. Certainly this year, but really in every year, right? Only perception involves partial awareness. Knowledge transcends the laws governing perception because partial knowledge is impossible. It is all one and has no separate parts. You who are really one with it need but know yourself, and your knowledge is complete. To know God's miracle is to know him. So I was just thinking, without equality, without the sameness, we're going to keep stumbling blindly in our attempts to find peace, because the Holy Spirit is always going to say, find the equality first, find the sameness first, and then in those moments of respite and relief and release from judgment, it's like, oh yeah, now there's a way out. Now there's a way out of the nightmarish quagmire of ego. So any thoughts or comments so far? There's about 145 more quotes on equality I could read.
This is going to be a long class.
But I won't. Yeah.
I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about that unwillingness, because
Sure.
I can recognize how unwilling I am.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, I guess.
Anyone else not recognize their unwillingness?
What does that get me? I'm just trying to.
Well, I think it's the noticing, I think that reminds me of one of Ken Wapnick's comments about, the way to do the workbook or the course in general perfectly is to notice how much we don't want to do it perfectly and then forgive ourselves, So it's that willingness to notice how incredibly reluctant and resistant we are to wanting the Holy Spirit's, wisdom, insight, peace to wash through us, because then the game over flashes on the screen of our mind, and ego said, I don't want that. I've got this separate identity to defend here. I can't have any of that nonsense. So
you're saying that by recognizing it, we're not resisting it, we're bringing it to the light.
Yeah. I think that was the sentence that Tim I pulled out of that quote, is that's such an important one, because that to notice that we're unwilling is huge. To notice that we're unwilling requires turning up the threshold, turning up the knob. And, like Abe was saying, you can see it in some of the big things, but, with practice, we can kind of, turn the threshold to the point where, oh, now I notice I was actually upset more often than I thought. And I think that another ego backlash strategy is often, it's like, oh, I'm really doing the course and I'm more miserable than ever. And I think that's, a common experience that some people say after a few years of studying the course. But I think what's really happening is I'm just noticing I've always been incredibly resistant to the ideas in the course, but now I'm just noticing more and more how much I'm digging in my heels and fighting back with everything I got. And Ken Wapnick's commentary on Workbook Lesson 182, which I listened to on my phone for about a year over and over and over again. There was if I sound like a broken record, it's because I was doing it sort of like a broken record. And I was listening to his commentary, which was really good, by the way. But there's this one comment that really, among all the other great comments, that stuck with me. And that is, the purpose of the course isn't to make us miserable. It's to, remind us how miserable we've made ourselves by fighting against it, and so just noticing our resistance and noticing our unwillingness to believe, and not only believe, but to know that we're one with God, and to remember that's huge. So maybe we should read anything else on that?
Lynn Altman had
Lynn?
Yeah, I just had a light bulb go on for me about the unwillingness, is that if I notice I'm unwilling, I think I'm bad. I have a real severe judgment about that. But I just saw that by noticing that I'm unwilling, I actually realize that I want something else. And so the judgment is designed to keep me from being aware that I don't want to stay in that ego realm. I mean, it's just like, that's been so huge for me, to not think that I'm a bad student, a bad person, a really slow learner, all of that stuff. And not really see, I mean, I've heard the words about that it's an ego tactic, but actually having the glimpse of that that could be like a really a point of enthusiasm for me at this, to notice how I'm, and I don't have to go anywhere with it. It's like what he said in that thing, call on him and let him call on heaven for you. That really, it is literally all I have to do is notice that I'm feeling resistant and go, thank God that I can see that. So anyway.
That's beautiful, and thanks.
Really great. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, you know, that aha moment when, and we read the first sentence in lesson 93, you know, I believe I'm the home of evil, darkness, and sin. And then when we let go of that, it's like, wait a minute. I've been assuming that was correct all along here. And what if that's not true? What a revelation that would be if I could actually, you know, question that. You know, I don't even actually have to stop the belief. I just have to, you know, consider that maybe that's not true. What? Thank you, Byron Katie, right? Or whatever. Yeah. What if that's not true? How do I know that that's true, that I'm the home of evil, darkness, and sin? Maybe not. Maybe Holy Spirit's got something going here, and I've been doing la 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 all along. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, part of the payoff for being a bad student is I still think I'm a student. Oh.
Whoops. Stage 5, development of trust, thud. Yeah. Oh, there's that. Right. Yeah. But we'll get through that too. You know. Yeah. Right. We'll get through all the little, or as Douglas Adams called it, the dark tea times of the soul. Right. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. Well, how about if I just read a little bit more of that lesson? So I'm going to jump to the fourth paragraph in lesson 124. Today we will not doubt his love for us, nor question his protection and his care. No meaningless anxieties can come between our faith and our awareness of his presence. We are one with him today in recognition and remembrance. We feel him in our hearts. Our minds contain his thoughts. Our eyes behold his loveliness in all we look upon. Today we see only the loving and the lovable. The image that comes to mind is Holy Spirit is grabbed the weapons out of our hand, instead of using them to destroy our peace, has ripped a hole in the ego's, you know, turned the ego's weapons against it, not the self that it never was, but against our belief in it, and just basically, you know, nuked the idea that we could be a sinful, evil, miserable, pathetic thing apart from perfect oneness, you know. So, and that is where the delightfully refreshing, luminous, radiant, shiny aha moment comes, and we have a little respite from the war against ourselves. Yeah. So, one more paragraph. 5. We see it in appearances of pain, and pain gives way to peace. We see it in the frantic and the sad and the distressed, the lonely and afraid, who are restored to the tranquility and peace of mind in which they were created. And we see it in the dying and the dead as well, restoring them to life. All this we see because we saw it first within ourselves. And of course, all the alleged others are just parts of our mind that we've orphaned off, and now we're bringing back and embracing as the equal, same, one being that we all are and share, and that has never had its innocence questioned or compromised or troubled by anything. Yeah. Okay. And the rest of the lesson is wonderful too. I guess there's just one thing that I noticed was repeated a couple times in paragraphs 10 and 11 that was kind of like a real gentle reminder to be patient with ourselves, where he says, perhaps today, perhaps tomorrow, you will see your own transfiguration in the glass. And then, you know, the hourly, half-hourly exercises. Perhaps today, perhaps tomorrow, you will look into this glass and understand the sinless light you see belongs to you. The loveliness you look on is your own. So that's the, you know, the peace and the remembrance of our real identity that Holy Spirit is leading us back to, where we you know, can let go of the difference between ourselves and each other. We can let go of the difference between ourselves and the Holy Spirit, and ultimately let go of the difference between ourselves and the Creator, the perfect oneness that we never left.
That gives a whole new definition of the experience of Stephen looking in the mirror.
And yeah, we're all looking in that mirror right now, aren't we? Smile. We're all looking at ourselves. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
We're all on candid camera.
Really. So with some of Ego's sacred cattle herd, you know, pulled out hopefully this last hour or so, and looked at gently, patiently, calmly, in the center of the storm, you know, the quiet center in the mind, with all the raging activity going on around. We can pause for a moment and how about another moment of peace here, and, you know, sit back, close your eyes, relax, and we'll reread that last sentence again. Let me remember I am one with God, at one with all my brothers and myself, in everlasting holiness and peace. Thank you all. Have a day
Thank you,
remembering
Bruce.
equality and
Thank you,
Wonderful
sameness.
Bruce.
meeting.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Bruce.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Bruce.
everybody.
Thanks, Bruce.
Peace and love.
Bye,
Have a great
everyone.
day.
Bye,
Very
everyone.
good.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.
Es excelente.